really stop to think about that? I mean, you walk down a street, you hop on the subway, you sit on a park bench. Seems pretty simple, right? But is that space, that whole experience, really the same for every single person who uses it? Let's really get into this. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack a really powerful idea that our cities, well, they aren't neutral. We're going to look at how everything from urban design to safety and economics is deeply shaped by gender, and how that in turn shapes the lives of women in some very specific ways. All right, here's our game plan. First, we're going to challenge a core assumption and explore why the city just isn't a neutral space. Then we'll zoom in on two major forces shaping women's lives, what's called the geography of fear and the double burden of work. And we'll wrap up with a story of resistance, how women are actively fighting to reclaim the city for themselves. Okay, so let's kick things off with this foundational idea. For centuries, our cities were basically built with a default citizen in mind. And that citizen was almost always male. This section is all about putting on a new pair of glasses to see how that one assumption shaped the very streets we walk on every day. This gendered lens is really our key tool for this whole explainer. It means we start asking questions we might not normally ask, like, who is this park bench really for? Why is this bus route designed this way and not another? Who feels safe walking here at night and who doesn't? It's all about seeing the hidden assumptions that are literally built into the concrete and steel all around us. And once we apply this lens, we start to see this very specific problem that the source material calls gendered urban insecurity. Now, this isn't just about, feeling unsafe on a dark street. It's a way bigger concept. It's defined as lacking the income or the resources you need for a secure and decent life in the city. And what this shows is just how tangled up this issue is. It's never just one thing. It's economic, things like unequal pay and fewer opportunities. It's environmental, like who's more likely to live in a polluted area. And of course, it's social, and that covers everything from personal safety to whether you have a community to rely on. So that social dimension brings us right to our second section. Here, we're going to focus on this concept called the geography of fear. It's about the invisible maps of safety and danger that so many people, especially women, carry around in their heads, maps that dictate how they can and can't move through the city. This quote, wow, it really challenges one of our most basic assumptions. We tend to think of public space as kind of dangerous and home as the ultimate safe haven. But this forces us to see that for way too many women, the home itself can be a place of violence. And that's a reality that's been historically swept under the rug and kept out of public conversation. And his whole contest over space, it absolutely plays out in public, too. I mean, just look at this picture. Man-spreading on a subway might seem like a small annoyance, right? But it's actually a perfect visual for a much larger dynamic. It's about who feels entitled to take up space, to be comfortable, and to basically claim public areas as their own. So here is the really crucial point. The fear of violence, whether it's public or private, isn't just a feeling. It has very real, tangible consequences. It dictates which streets women avoid after dark, which jobs they can't even apply for because the commute feels unsafe, and which parts of the city are, for all intents and purposes, completely off limits to them. It literally shrinks their world. And that tension, that shrinking world, leads us straight into our third section, the double burden. Here, we're going to explore how the city is built for one kind of work, while pretty much ignoring another kind, and what happens to the women who are so often expected to do both. The key concept we need to understand here is social reproduction. It sounds a little academic, but it's all the essential, unpaid work that makes all the other work possible. We're talking childcare, caring for elderly parents, cooking meals, keeping a household running. It's literally the work that reproduces the workforce and society itself. And get this, a poster from the 1940s telling housewives to finish their travel by 4 p.m. to free up public transit for the workers coming home. I mean, this is just a stunningly clear example of how cities were designed with a single user in mind, the male breadwinner commuting to and from his 9-to-5 job. Women's travel patterns, which are often more complex, like a web of trips for groceries, school runs, and errands, were just seen as less important. So here's the conflict laid out in simple terms. On one side, you've got production. That's the formal, paid work that gets counted in the GDP and decides how our roads and zoning are designed. On the other, you have reproduction, the essential, unpaid work that is totally invisible to most planners. Our cities are built for that first column, which creates constant headaches for anyone trying to manage the second. That right there is the double burden in action. To really see how this plays out in the real world, let's look at a case study. We're heading to Bagong Barrio, a really dense neighborhood in Manila. It's a place where these big global economic forces have a huge impact on a very local level. So here, intense economic pressures have created this phenomenon of transnational mothers. Many women migrate to work as domestic helpers in wealthier countries. They're doing paid care work over there while trying to manage their own families from thousands of miles away. It creates this incredibly complex, globalized care chain where that work of social reproduction is stretched across entire continents, and it profoundly changes families and communities back home. Okay, so now let's hop across the globe to a totally different context, just to see how these same themes pop up again. Our second case study takes us to Georgetown, the capital of Guyana, where economic vulnerability for women takes on a bit of a different shape. This quote from the source uses a local phrase that is just so incredibly evocative: catch a hand. It means to struggle, to scrape by, to piece together an existence day by day. It perfectly captures how, for women in Georgetown, being precarious isn't just about finding work, it's also about the constant threat of losing your home, weaving that economic and social insecurity tightly together. But, this isn't just a story of insecurity and limitations. That's only half of it. In our final section, we're looking at the other side of the coin, how women aren't just passive victims of the gendered city, but are actually active agents, fighting to change it. And this image, well, it captures that spirit of resistance perfectly. This is from a slut walk protest. It was a global movement that kicked off after a police officer suggested that to prevent sexual assault, women should avoid dressing like sluts. These marches are this powerful public act of taking back space and just completely rejecting victim blaming. And this resistance happens on every level. You see it in the streets with big visible protests. You see it behind the scenes with the really crucial work of policy advocacy to change laws and city budgets. And you see it at the hyperlocal level with grassroots organizing, like neighborhood safety audits, where women themselves walk the streets, identify problems, and demand change. So after looking through this gendered lens, what's the ultimate takeaway? It's actually pretty simple, but it's also profound. We can't build better, more inclusive cities for everyone until we first understand the specific and often invisible ways they are failing half the population. That awareness, that's the first and most critical step toward any real action. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. The design of our cities isn't an accident, right? It's the result of centuries of choices, priorities, and assumptions. So knowing that, the challenge for all of us now is to ask, how do we start making different choices? How can we begin to rebuild our urban world, not just for some default citizen, but for absolutely everyone?